My name is Doris Betcher, and when the war broke out, I was working at the AAA in Mount Clemens, Michigan, where I lived.
How old were you at the time?
I was 18 years old in 1941, and that's when the war broke out.
When did you get married?
Got married in August of 1943.
And was your husband in the service at the time?
Ray was already in service since January of that year, and we had planned to be married, but decided to do it before the war ended, even though my parents objected.
Did you follow your husband throughout his...
I went with him as long as I could. We were together until he went overseas, and I went out to Wendover, and I think he left around the 12th of February. And I went out to California with a friend that I had met out there, and then on back to Michigan, where eventually I had our son. He was born at the end of May in 1944. And Ray didn't see him until he was 14 months old. Ray was over there for 17 months.
And how often did he write to you?
Every day.
What kinds of things did you write about?
Well, once in a while he tried to put something in there that the censor would cut out. He had to start writing on one side of the paper, because if he wrote on both sides, I didn't get to see what was on the other side.
Did you know much about what was going on over there by reading about the newspapers or things like that?
Yes, every once in a while there would be an article in the paper, and I knew where he was because this friend of mine in California had a husband in the 788 Squadron, and that squadron was sent to Italy. And when he went to Italy, he wrote to his wife telling her where he had been, and he said, "Tell Doris that Ray is in Norwich." So I knew where he was.
To what extent were you worried and concerned about him being overseas?
Well, I was concerned because of expecting our first child, and you know, when you have your first one, you're worried anyway, and him not being there, and I didn't know if he'd be back.
Were you with other war brides so that you could share your concerns?
Yes, there were some in my hometown, but I was living at home with my parents and my brother. And, there was a 3-week period before D-Day that I didn't get any mail, and during that time our son was born. And when I went to the hospital, there was someone in the hospital that her husband was a paratrooper, and she hadn't heard from him for the same length of time, so I knew that things were happening over in Europe. And as soon as D-Day happened, I had 3 weeks mail all at the same time.
What was your reaction when you saw your son for the first time?
Well, that's kind of a little bit hard to describe. He's already walking, and by the way, he was talking at that time too, wasn't he? And it's rather kind of a strange feeling, to tell the truth. It makes you wonder where you had been all that time.
He missed a lot.
And what you had missed.
Tell me, what do you remember about when you first found out that your son had been born?
As I recall, I think they tried to send a telegram, and
my mother had sent, what do they call it?
V-mail or?
I don't know what it was. I think she went through the Red Cross with a cable, and they took out all the numbers. They wouldn't allow any numbers in it. So all he ended up receiving was Gary arrived, everyone fine. They took out the date, the everything, the weight,
the everything.
Everything that she wanted in there, they took out. But he knew it.
I guess they were probably afraid there might have been a little bit of a coded message in there or something.
How do you feel now when you look back on those years, both of you?
I think it was a good experience. I had always been well taken care of at home, and living out there in Wendover, that was quite an experience. When I tell people now what I went through out there, I wouldn't have wanted my children to do the same thing. We ended up washing clothes at the, we lived in, first when I got out there, I had to have a job in order to stay in Wendover. Then I had to live in a WAC barracks for 2 weeks before I could get into a trailer. And the trailers were quite small, and we had to share them with another couple. Ray wasn't allowed off the base, but there was a way that even the fellow at the gate told him where to go to get off, so he was there almost every night. And when we washed clothes, we were told not to hang them up by the laundry room because people were stealing them. So we hung lines all over the trailer and had layers of sheets and clothing, and had to remove the layers as they dried. So I don't imagine it was a very healthy situation. And we had to there was only one store in Wendover. It was a very small community. The air base was the main thing in the town. And we had to carry our own oil for heating the trailer. And he didn't get out of the base early enough. I had to go to the store and buy the oil and stand there and wait for him to come and get it and carry it back to the trailer. So it was a little hardship, but I was glad to be with him, so it made it all worthwhile.
I was going to say, by the time you carry 5 gallons of oil for about a half a mile, your arms are dragging the ground.
Do you think the young women today might do the same thing?
I don't think so. I think, and just knowing we have 2 girls besides our son that was born when he was overseas, and I don't think they would have put up with what I did.
What do your daughters say when you tell them about these things?
They wanted it to be put on tape at some time. They said, tell these things and put it on tape so we'll have it.
That's great.
Well, you know, probably some of the toughest times were when I had to leave Wendover, and the day we shipped out, I left Doris at the trailer, and she headed for California. I headed for the East Coast, and shortly before we shipped out, I had received a message that
Oh, you can't. His mother died.
it's the first time I've broken down on this. I found out my mother had cancer, and
He
I
tried.
couldn't get a purple.
He tried to get home when we were out in Wendover, and he called.
She died while I was going around the boat.
Yeah, she died on March the 8th, and he arrived over there on the 10th of March. So, but he tried from Wendover. He contacted someone at the base, and they said no way. So
Not even the Red Cross couldn't help.
No, Red Cross didn't do anything.
nobody would help.
And probably, if they had done anything about it, I would have been assigned to some other crew.
Yes.